Hello my chocolate cream cakes and welcome to this video. And as you can tell by the fleece, I'm all prepped for this. I don't play about geography. Geography A-level was literally like my favourite time. I loved it, and I do geography as like half of my degree now at uni, so I am going to impart all of my wisdom, and this genuinely I think is going to be the ultimate geography A-level video whatever. I think it's probably going to be one of the best videos on my channel, and I've asked my friends who did OCR and AQA, the two other exam boards, because I did edexcel geography, to check over what I'm going to say in this video, and they were all like, yeah, this is all good, add a bit of this. So this is like comprehensive, okay? This is not just exam board specific. And for a bit of context why you should trust me, so I had to write it down, but for my geography A-level in 2025 I got 299 out of 350, and the grade boundary for an A-star was 270, so I got 29 marks above. Paper 1 physical I got 76%, paper 2 human I got 86%, paper 3, which I think only edexcel and OCR do, but I got 91%, and then in my NEA I got 93%. So this is why you should trust me. And I also did biology and chemistry as well, so it wasn't like I was spending all my time on geography. I'm going to go through tips, structure, things like that, you know. So firstly, something that I found really useful was memorizing the time split for each question, so you know instantly when you go into the exam room and you're doing a paper how long are you spending on each question. So depending, say for example, if your exam starts at 10 AM, you know, okay, by 10:06 you need to be on to the next question, and then 10:12 you need to be on to the next question. And that helped me really like keep on track of where I was during the exam. And for edexcel you usually get 1.3 minutes per mark in paper 1 and 2. That's what was drilled into us when I was doing A-level. I'm not too sure about the other examples, so just check, but that is really helpful. And equally memorizing the exact structure you need to use for each question, because that doesn't change. The content does, but the structure does not. So say for example, any question below 12 marks, you don't do an introduction or a conclusion, you just write it like 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, or with like a 20 marker you would do an intro and a conclusion, and then about 4 paragraphs, I think 4-5 paragraphs in the middle, something like that. But knowing what you are going to do as soon as you open up the exam paper is really helpful, because then you don't need to think about that part. You can just think solely on the content and the argument that you're presenting. And then when you are writing an answer, because for me I was really good at, you know, memorizing the case studies, the statistics, and I could form sequences of like arguments. However, I found it really difficult to just answer a question, if that makes sense, if you relate. Like I would read the question and just think I'm reading the words, but I don't know what answer it wants me to produce. So I'm going to break this down in this video as well. But what you need to do firstly is, although it sounds simple, underline every important aspect of the question really helps. So, or you could do like a different thing for each part of the question. So do a box around, what do you call it? The command word. So whether it's describe, so that means you do not explain it, you just describe, otherwise you're just wasting time. Or evaluate, where you have to come to a conclusion. And also try not to go, it's just good, or it's just bad, or it's in the middle. The best thing to do is to say it's mostly good, however it's bad in this aspect, or it's mostly bad, however there are some good parts. So you want to have a clear stance, but you're not disregarding other people's who might be against it or for it, you know. So anyway, if you are evaluating or if you are explaining something, so you are aware of the command word, because that tells you how you're going to structure your answer. Then you need to underline any other relevant parts of the question. So if it mentions a time frame, like after 1945, do not write about anything before 1945. That was me in my paper 3. I realized I wrote about the wrong time frame, and then I had to like frantically write another page to actually answer the question, because I wouldn't have gotten marks on anything that I wrote before. And then obviously any keywords like globalization or coastal erosion Also, when you are about to write your answer, it's mostly like 8 marks and above, that's what I'm thinking, I would really recommend just bullet pointing genuinely basic plan of what you're going to write about. And when I say basic, I genuinely just mean just write the name of the case study. So like Salford Keys, Holderness Coast, and then maybe write like a percentage as well, so that reminds you not to forget that statistic that you can use that's really relevant. I mean, it depends obviously on the type of person you are. I didn't write like a proper plan, I just wrote out all the examples I wanted to talk about, and that was like my plan, because then I knew, okay, I'll do a paragraph for this, a paragraph for that, paragraph for another thing. But always have some sort of plan. Do not just start writing. You need to think and flesh out your answer, because that will really show if you don't plan, because it will just sound kind of scattered. So always have some sort of plan. And also it helps you with picking your strongest argument. If you have quite a few case studies but you're not sure which one to use, if you write it out and think about it for a few minutes, then that means you're not writing with just one of them and then midway realizing it's actually not as good as another one could have been that you also thought of. So now sort of on to the actual answers that you produce. So for introductions, defining something in the question. So say for example, if it's talking about something to do with the effects of globalization, define what globalization is and maybe add an example that then links it back to the question. So say for example, if it's asking about how successful globalization has been in a country, you could maybe give an example of what globalization can be as well, like joining more global organizations or improved transport infrastructure. And that also helps link your definition of globalization, so it's not just like thrown in there, to the question, because then that sets up the rest of your answer where it's like, oh, how successful has it been for globalization? But you've also got some examples at the top which are like, these are some examples, and we can then assess how successful it's been based on how good it has been at advancing these parts. And also in the introduction, if you are arguing against what the question is saying, then you can add your however here. So you could say like, yes, blah, blah, however, and that sets up the rest of your answer. And then in the opposite sense, like with the conclusion, that's summing everything up, and that's just like a nice overview. But here I would really like recommend adding some sort of nuance, adding some sort of like uncertainty, or adding some sort of acknowledgement of other positions. So say for example, if your question was about the success of regeneration, you talk about, yes, regeneration has many economic benefits, or yes, it benefits a lot of stakeholders, however it can't meet the needs of many groups such as environmentalists, because they have different priorities and they have different perceptions of what success is. Also, you could add in like an extra fact and really like double down on your stance, what you're saying, and then just basically repeat the main argument that you've stated throughout the answer. So also with your paragraphs, obviously, you know, you always have your topic sentence. This is the first one of all of your main body paragraphs. Do not ever refer to a case study or a statistic or a figure or anything in the first sentence. The first sentence is literally just like stating what the rest of the paragraph will be about, like it's your point. But also I want to say with paper 3 edexcel, because you get your booklet with all the figures, make sure you refer to the exact figures, because you kind of get marks with that as well, and that's so easy to do. So don't forget to refer to the specific figures in your answer. Like your topic sentence is the foundation, so you don't add those intricate little details yet. That's saved for the rest of your paragraph. So with geography, the spec, the mark scheme are the most important things. So let's talk about like the mark scheme. So the mark scheme is really boring, but it's also really important. So we were always like told this, but read the mark schemes and you will understand where your marks come from. Like AO1 is like your understanding. One of the AOs is about your interpretation. It's been a while since I've done A-level. However, I can attest that knowing how your marks are split up is really important. Because say for example, I do remember 6 markers in edexcel. Half of it is just like describing the photo that you're given, or like the diagram. The other half is then your own knowledge. So even if you had no idea like how to answer the question, you've got a picture, just describe everything you can see on it. So knowing how you get your marks can then help you prioritize what things you need to be doing for the answer. Like with the 6 marker, if you just gave a decent explanation, you'd be getting like 5 out of 6, which is pretty good, you know? So the big thing that I did with my answers were just peel. So I would always have my peel paragraphs where you give your point, your evidence, you explain the evidence, and then you link it back to the question. And for me, during year 12, the link part was always like where I struggled. Like maybe I remember the first time I did a 20 marker and I got 12. Yeah, it was kind of rough at the start because I couldn't link. But what you need to do is, it's so much simpler than you think, I guess. Like, you genuinely just need to rephrase the question that they've given. Like, use the exact words in the question and just stick that into your answer. So if it's like, again, like how successful is regeneration, and you say, oh, it's like improved the economic environment of the area, then you say, because it's improved the economic landscape of the area, or something like that. Therefore, regeneration here can be seen as successful for the local council or for the businesses, something like that. But you genuinely just rephrase the main question into a sentence that backs up what you've just said in your paragraph, and that's your linking point. Because examiners read so many answers, you know, they just want to see the very obvious, like easy to read sentences where it's like, oh yeah, they've linked it back. But I think also, because I know people will be thinking like, how many paragraphs do I do for each question and stuff? But it really does depend, because for me, like sometimes you write more paragraphs that are quite short. Like I remember I did a 12 marker and it was about 2 different river catchment areas, 2 different river basins, and there were different things happening in the basin, and it was like which one's more likely to flood, and it was like different geologies, different levels of urbanization, stuff like that. And so for that one, I remember I think I did 5-6 paragraphs, but each paragraph was just like 2-3 sentences, because it doesn't even look like a paragraph, but it's its own point and everything. So I had like 6 paragraphs, but they were really short. Whereas, for example, in geography questions where you've got your like proper case studies and everything, those are maybe more chunkier paragraphs. But it really does depend. So don't always stick religiously to the like 3 paragraphs, 5 paragraphs, whatever. Like, do what feels right. Sacrificing the smaller questions, like the 4 markers, the 3 markers, for extra time on your like 12, 20 is better than spending all your time doing the smaller ones. However, my friend did say that if you are like a C or a D student, your marks will mostly be coming from those smaller questions. So after this question, you won't be a D or a C student or an E student. I'm thinking after this video, guaranteed A star. However, when you're starting off, maybe just be a bit aware and honest of your current capability and then tailoring it as such. Because I think it's the biggest waste when you write a page for a 4 marker and then you only do 1 paragraph for an 8 marker. However, there are nuances, because if the 8 marker is on a topic that you're really like unfamiliar with, just doing that 1 paragraph and then dedicating time to your other questions is better. So this isn't necessarily a tip, but it's more just like a be aware of this and be honest with your ability and sort of tailor it towards that.